Along with Sweden's Gripen, the Dassault Rafale is almost certainly to be the last major combat aircraft to be developed by a single European nation. Today, it is the pride of French industry and a showcase for the best that French technology has to offer. Like its great rival, the Typhoon, it was born out of military requirements that surfaced in Western Europe in the late 1970s. By going it alone, France avoided many of the political pitfalls that befell the Eurofighter program, and the Rafale entered service first. Rafale is a true state-of-the-art multi-role aircraft, offering an unmatched air-to-surface capability, backed up by formidable prowess in the air-to-air mission. Rafale's manufacturer Dassault markets it as the omni-role fighter, able to perform any task that is required of it in the current and future battle space. When France was still part of the European fighter program, one of the stumbling blocks was what size the new fighter should be. France wanted a slightly smaller aircraft than the other partners, so when Dassault left the table, it was free to pursue a design that was optimized for the French requirement. The result was an aircraft very slightly smaller and lighter than the Eurofighter. The compact design of the Rafale allowed Dassault to ignore wing folding for the carrier version, although the heavier structural components required for the maritime mission meant that Rafale M was heavier than the other versions. Rafale's designers took the decision to use fixed intakes for simplicity and lower cost, but they're efficient enough for the aircraft to easily reach its required top speed of Mach 1.8. More importantly, the aircraft is one of the few that can supercruise, that is, fly supersonically without the use of afterburner. A high internal fuel fraction, the ability to carry large tanks externally, and the installation of fuel-efficient engines give the Rafale an excellent range even when carrying heavy weapon loads. The aircraft is very maneuverable too. Its advanced close-coupled aerodynamics, fly-by-wire controls, and high thrust-to-weight ratio giving it an instantaneous turn rate of more than 30 degrees per second, and the ability to sustain turns when other fighters are rapidly running out of energy. Rafale is also no slouch in low-speed maneuvering, its intake design and canards allowing it to operate at angles of attack in excess of 30 degrees. As well as making the aircraft fully competitive with other fighters in high-speed maneuvering, Dassault's designers also had to make it fly slow enough to land aboard France's small carriers. Rafale's approach speed is 5 km per hour lower than that of the Super Intendard, the type it is supplanting, and handling and controllability during the approach are described as excellent. A prime mover in the Rafale's design was the ability to carry a heavy load of diverse weapon types. The land-based Rafale B and C have 14 hardpoints from which various stores can be hung. Each wing has a tip-mounted launch rail, and an outer hardpoint for the carriage of air-to-air missiles. Central and inner underwing pylons are available for the carriage of heavy stores, including the ability to carry twin or triple racks. The fuselage has 4 lateral stations, 2 either side of the rear fuselage for missile or light bomb carriage, and 2 at the front that can be used for bombs but are more normally used to mount podded systems. Finally, there are 2 centerline hardpoints in tandem under the fuselage for heavy stores carriage. Because the Rafale M's nose gear requires greater clearance when it retracts than that of the land-based Rafales, the Navy version does not have the forward centerline hardpoint, reducing its total number to 13. Rafale also has a potent internal cannon for short-range air-to-air work and strafing. Developed by GIAT, the 30M791 gun is located beneath the starboard wing root, typically firing 21 rounds in half-second bursts. Its effective range in the air-to-air role is 2.5 kilometers. When the first standard F-1 Rafales entered service, they were equipped only for the air-to-air role. For short-range engagements, they carried the Magic II missile, a heat-seeking, all-aspect weapon in the class of the Sidewinder. Although Magics can be carried on outer and center underwing pylons, they are usually carried on the wingtip launch rails. For longer-range engagements, the Rafale carries the Mika EM. Mika was developed by Matra, now part of MBDA, as a new family of lightweight advanced missiles. The Electromagnetique, or EM version used by all Rafales, is characterized by having a pointed nose radome covering an active radar seeker. Operating in a similar fashion to the American AMRAAM, Mika EM can undertake multi-target engagements and allows the launch aircraft to turn away once the missile has acquired the target. Standard F-2 Rafales will replace the Magic IIs with the Mika IR, similar to the EM, but with a rounded nose housing a dual-band imaging infrared seeker. Mika IR can be used at both short and long range, and in some scenarios can be used together with EM, a Rafale firing examples of both to maximize the probability of a kill. Mika IR can be used with the FSO system to provide a completely silent engagement capability, and can also be slaved to the helmet sight for off-bore sight over-the-shoulder attacks. Mikas of both variants can be carried on most of the Rafale's hardpoints, but a typical air defense load has IR missiles on the wingtip rails, EMs on the aft lateral pylons, and further examples of either under the wings. At some point in the future, Mika EM will be supplanted by the Meteor ramjet-powered missile, of which development is now underway. All but the wingtip rails are available for air-to-ground stores, and Rafale can carry up to 22 free-fall bombs in the 250-kilogram, 500-pound class. However, Rafale is a highly sophisticated aircraft, and to maximize its effect, most weapons would be guided. Laser-guided bombs are typically carried from the center wing pylons or on the center line, with a laser designator pod on one of the front lateral fuselage stations. Smaller LGBs can be carried on dual racks to increase the number available, or to free up other pylons for other stores. Both French and US laser bombs are options. Another laser-guided weapon that the Rafale can carry is the Aerospatiale AS-30L missile. Sagem is developing a new family of bombs that will be used by Rafale. Dubbed Armament Air Sol Modulaire, or AASM, their new family employs a variety of warhead sizes between 500 and 2,000 pounds, combined with a GPS guidance system similar to that used by the American JDAM. Further development adds an imaging infrared seeker for highly accurate terminal phase guidance. AASM weapons can be carried on most pylons, at least in the lighter versions, and can be carried on dual or even triple launchers. Providing the Rafale with an even greater punch is the Scalp EG, a standoff turbojet-powered cruise missile. Scalp EG is essentially similar to the Storm Shadow used by the Eurofighter and allows the Rafale to hit hardened targets from great distance. Scalp is powered by a small jet. Covers blow off the missile intakes prior to launch. It uses a combination of GPS, inertial and terrain reference navigation to steer itself to the target, switching to an imaging infrared seeker for the terminal phase. The similar Apache missile is an anti-runway weapon. Although it has been tested on Rafale, there are no plans to field it on the type yet. For anti-ship attacks, the standard F-3 Rafale can use the well-known Exocet, carrying up to 4 under the wings. They may be equipped in the future with a new ramjet-powered anti-surface weapon. Standard F-3 Rafales will introduce a nuclear capability thanks to the ASMPA missile. Developed from the existing ASMP, the ameliorated or improved version uses ramjet power for increased range and greater attack trajectory options. ASMPA would normally be carried singly on the centerline pylon and is expected to be deployed with both the Air Force and Navy. From the combat avionics point of view, Rafale is a truly state-of-the-art aircraft, employing sensor fusion to the full. In the past, pilots took information from a variety of sources and then had to analyze the data in their brains. The Rafale's modular data processing unit does that automatically, freeing the pilot to concentrate on tactics. Data is gathered from a variety of sources and is then prioritized, analyzed, and fused to present a clear picture to the pilot, optimized for the tactical situation. Rafale has 3 principal onboard sensor groups: the radar, the front sector optronics, and the electronic warfare system. The Rafale's radar is known officially as the Radar à Balayage Électronique de Plein, or RBE2 for short. It employs a passive electronically steered antenna array rather than a traditional mechanical dish antenna. Unlike the more recent active E-scan radars, however, it only has a single transmitter source. The radar array consists of 2 lens arrays, one of which steers the beam vertically and the other horizontally. A polarizing element separates them. The phased array allows the very rapid shifting of the beam, in turn giving it a high resistance to countermeasures. The lack of moving parts also makes it lighter and very reliable. The RBE2 gives Rafale the ability to track 40 air targets and engage 8 simultaneously, with missiles launched at 2-second intervals. The radar can keep tracking the other 32 targets while still providing positional updates to the missiles during their flyout. The radar seen here on test in an anechoic chamber also has a range of air-to-surface modes, including terrain following. A ship attack mode was introduced by standard F2 aircraft, and a synthetic aperture high-resolution mapping mode will be added by standard F3. While the RBE2 passive E-scan radar provides considerable benefits over traditional radars, it is also something of a technological dead end and has been superseded by active E-scan radars that use many hundreds of individually steered transmit-receive modules. An active antenna array is under development for the standard F4 Rafale, with a development radar already flying. Another important sensor group is the front sector optronics, or FSO. This consists of an infrared sensor to starboard and a combined TV and laser rangefinder to port. FSO can be used for completely silent tracking of airborne targets, either supplanting or augmenting radar data. At shorter ranges, the FSO could easily become the primary air-to-air sensor, as it offers better angular tracking capability and is virtually immune to countermeasures. FSO is also used in the ground attack role, providing long-range target acquisition and identification and accurate laser range finding. It aids low-level flight. The third of the Rafale's onboard sensor groups is the Spectra EW suite. This comprises a series of radar, infrared and laser warning and receiving antennas distributed around the airframe, giving complete coverage around the aircraft. In the self-protection role, these antennas and the associated processing system can detect, classify and locate threats with great rapidity and accuracy. The system can then deploy a range of countermeasures, including jammers, internal chaff dispensers and infrared decoy flares carried in boxes in the rear blended wing route. As well as protecting the Rafale, the Spectra system can also function as an accurate intelligence gathering system. In the future, two Rafales may share Spectra information by data link, using triangulation to enhance the system's accuracy. In addition to its onboard sensors, Rafale also has a MIDS LVT data link that allows aircraft to share and fuse their data with other network users, either other Rafales or with platforms such as AWACS. As well as its internal systems, the Rafale can use various podded sensors. The FSO does not provide laser designation, so to guide its own LGBs, the Rafale can carry the Damocles pod from the forward lateral stations. Damocles is the latest in a line of French laser targeting pods with a staring array infrared sensor offering wide and narrow fields of view. The latest infrared technology allows the Rafale to drop its bombs from high altitude and at some distance from the target. The Damocles incorporates a spot tracker as well as a designator. Rafale can also use the older PDL-CT laser pod as carried by this AS-30L armed Rafale M. Standard F3 Rafales will introduce the pod Rico Nouvelle Generation, an electro-optical reconnaissance pod that uses a rotating nose section housing the lens for a high-resolution sensor. One look inside the Rafale's cockpit confirms that it is one of the most modern to be found in any aircraft. The pilot sits on a Martin Baker Mk16F ejection seat. This lightweight unit has full zero altitude, zero speed capabilities. The pilot is confronted by very few switches and dials on the main display. Instead, the workstation is dominated by three large screens, topped by a large head-up display. The 30 by 22 degree head-up display is for the presentation of what the French call short-term information. This comprises essential aircraft information such as speed, altitude and heading, combined with targeting data. Below the HUD is a large 20 by 20 degree full-color head-level display, usually used to present a fused battle space picture with target, threat and route information. Either side of two smaller 5x5-inch head-level screens that show supporting data. They can be used to bring up checklists or aircraft status displays. The head-level screens are collimated to infinity so that pilots' eyes do not have to refocus as they move rapidly between the screens, the HUD and the outside world. Immediately noticeable is the lack of data entry buttons that traditionally surround such displays. In the Rafale, the screens are touch-sensitive, so that data entry is performed by direct touch on the screen. The Rafale pilot having to wear special seamless gloves. Control of many combat functions, including sensor and stores management, is performed by various switches on the throttle and side-mounted stick. Known in the US as HOTUS, in France this concept is called 3M, for main sommage et manette. From standard F3, the Rafale will also feature direct voice input to control several non-safety critical functions. The later Rafales will also be compatible with a Gafaut helmet-mounted display, with HUD-style data being presented on the pilot's helmet visor. The HMD will allow the Rafale pilot to designate targets just by looking at them, allowing off-boreside shots with the Mika IR missile. From its mostly composite airframe to its fly-by-wire control system, the Rafale embodies advanced technologies to reduce weight, complexity and cost, while maintaining a high operational capability and low maintenance requirements. Power is provided by two SNECMA M88 turbofans, development of which began in 1986. The M88 is a two-spool turbofan with a very high thrust-to-weight ratio, yet a low fuel burn. The M88 has digital control linked to the flight control system, and the pilot can slam the throttles open and closed in any region of the flight envelope. Engine acceleration from idle to maximum thrust can be accomplished in less than 3 seconds. SNECMA has improved the M88's fuel burn and reliability since it was first flown in the Rafale, the current version being known as the M88-2E4. While the M88-2 provides sufficient power for the Rafale at present, future developments will see the aircraft's weight increase, possibly to as much as 26 tons. An M88-3 engine with 20% more thrust is under development for later Rafales. Internal fuel is held in integral wing tanks and in a fuselage tank located between the intake ducts. A bolt-on fixed refueling probe can be fitted on the starboard side of the nose. This can be used for refueling from any drogue-equipped tanker, such as buddy pod-equipped Rafales and Air Force C-135s. 5 of the Rafale's hardpoints are plumbed for the carriage of external tanks, the centerline and the 2 innermost wing pylons. Any of the 5 stations can carry the 1,250-litre supersonic tanks, while the inner wing pylons and centerline can carry the massive 2,000-litre tank, distinguished by its bulbous front end. In 2001, Dassault tested a Rafale B with 2 conformal fuel tanks mounted either side of the aircraft's spine, each containing 1,150 litres. For the tanker role, the Rafale can carry a buddy pod on the centerline. Standard F3 aircraft will introduce a new pod that contains fuel itself, as well as the hose drogue refueling gear. Flight control is handled by a sophisticated fly-by-wire system with 3 digital channels and an analog backup. Control surfaces comprise a single-piece rudder, 2-section elevons on the trailing edge of each wing, two-section leading edge slats, and the canard foreplanes. The flight control system deploys any and all of these surfaces to match the aircraft's attitude and maneuvering to the control inputs made by the pilot or autopilot. The system also ensures that the aircraft does not stray outside of the safe flight envelope. For a relatively small aircraft, the Rafale carries a huge load, in turn requiring a strong undercarriage to cope with operations at high weights. To handle repeated no-flare carrier landings and the stresses of catapult launches, the Rafale M has an even stronger undercarriage than its land-based cousin, combined with local airframe strengthening. The nose gear incorporates a launch bar for connection to the carrier's catapult shuttle. It also mounts elements of the carrier landing system. Under the rear fuselage is a heavy-duty arrestor hook, replaced in the Rafale B and C by a lighter hook for emergency-arrested runway landings. Under the initial Rafale fielding plan, the first aircraft was scheduled for delivery in 1996, but the initial production aircraft, a 2-seater, did not fly until November 1998. Budgetary restraints pushed Rafale's service entry further to the right and also slowed down the production rate. The first 4 production aircraft, 2 Bs, a C, and an M, also had test instrumentation installed and so went to the test fleet, primarily for work associated with the standard F2 configuration. Test operations are largely conducted from Dassault's Flight Test Center at Istres, with the Air Force's CEAM at Mont de Marsan and at the Main Weapons Trials Facility at Cazaux. Although the Air Force was eager to get its hands on the Rafale, it was the Navy's need that was the greatest. On the 4th of December 2000, the first 2 aircraft for an operational unit were delivered. The Aéro Naval accepting Rafale's M2 and M3 at Nant de Visieux in Brittany. The Rafales began the re-equipment of Flotille 12F, which had ceased operating the F-8 Crusader in 1999. The rapid delivery of 10 Rafales to 12F allowed the squadron to restore an air defense capability to the French fleet. The first deliveries were of aircraft in the LF-1 configuration, with very limited radar and EW capabilities. Later, they were upgraded to full standard F-1 configuration, although this is restricted to air-to-air missions only and does not have MECA IR capability. Flotille 12F began deploying aboard the French carrier Charles de Gaulle and achieved an initial operating capability in late 2001. Full service clearance was granted on the 25th of June 2004, by which time the aircraft had flown air cover missions over Afghanistan, while the carrier sailed in the Indian Ocean. The Aéro Naval plans to buy 60 Rafale Ms. They will gradually supplant the Super Intendant in the fleet. Flotille 11F and 17F will join 12F as the operational units, although subsequent deliveries will be of standard F2 and F3 aircraft. Eventually, the Navy will have 3 frontline squadrons of 14 standard F3 aircraft each. For a while, it was envisaged that the Navy's fleet would be split between the M and the Rafale N, a 2-seat version. However, the N was cancelled on cost grounds. Air Force requirements for the Rafale stand at 234, with a preponderance of 2-seaters to perform high workload missions, such as deep strike and, eventually, the leading of formations of unmanned combat aircraft. The first requirement was for a Jaguar replacement. Initial Air Force deliveries went to Squadron EC-5-330, a test unit at Mont-de-Marsan. Here, crews began working up the first frontline squadron, which transferred to its operational base at Saint-Dizier in April 2006. On the 27th of June, Escadron de Chasse 17, named for Provence, was declared operational with a mix of single and 2-seat standard F2 aircraft. Rafale will progressively replace the Mirage F1 and the earlier Mirage 2000s, eventually taking over the reconnaissance role and some of the nuclear commitments. The final total may not reach the full 234 figure due to further budget cuts. Rafale's omni-role capabilities allow it to undertake the entire range of combat aircraft missions. This is especially important to the French Navy, for whom the Rafale will soon be the only combat aircraft in the inventory. France's current aircraft carrier, Charles de Gaulle, plus a second carrier now under joint development with the British, can each carry up to 30 Rafales, but around 20 would be a more typical number. The air wing also includes helicopters and a pair of Hawkeyes for air control. Charles de Gaulle is a versatile power projection tool, able to embark air wings of varying makeup to match force requirements. Rafale is its most potent weapon. In a typical scenario, the air wing may be called upon to attack a heavily defended coastal target, a mission that utilizes the Rafale's versatility to the full. In time of war or tension, it is likely that Rafales will be flying permanent combat air patrol missions to defend the fleet against air attack. For these tasks, the aircraft would carry 3 fuel tanks, Mika IR on the wingtips, and at least 4 Mika EMs, a typical air defense loadout. To prepare for the attack, a reconnaissance-configured Rafale would be launched to provide detailed intelligence of the target and its defenses. Carrying a Pod Rico NG under the center line, together with the Mikas for self-defense, the aircraft is able to perform its mission independently. However, it may also operate with an escort of Rafale fighters. Using the Pod Rico's long-range capabilities to the full, the Rafale can gather imagery from many miles away, allowing it to stay outside the range of the defenses. The imagery can be data-linked back to the carrier for immediate analysis. The Rafale's Spectra EW suite can also be used to compile intelligence about the enemy's electronic order of battle. With targeting details gathered and analyzed, the attack mission can be planned. Individual aircraft mission plans are preloaded into the aircraft's onboard navigation system. Charles de Gaulle has 2 catapults, one forward and one in the waist position. Each is able to launch an aircraft every 80 seconds. Retractable deflectors are situated behind the catapults to protect against damage from the aircraft's jet blast. For a maximum effort attack against a large target complex, a sizable package would be launched. Fighter-configured Rafales are launched to provide a front line of defense against aerial opposition. In the fighter role, Rafale pilots use the aircraft's sophisticated sensors and cockpit systems to the full to defeat air threats at long range. For the initial strike, it is likely that the Scalp EG standoff cruise missile would be employed. Scalp carriers are loaded with 2 missiles each, with fuel tanks and self-defense Mekas. If the defenses have been degraded by the initial strike, follow-up attacks can be made using laser-guided bombs and the AASM weapon, which uses GPS and infrared guidance. The laser bombers carry the Damocles designator pod on the starboard forward fuselage hardpoint. Additional Rafales are also launched to act as tankers for the strike package, carrying a buddy pod on the center line. The bolt-on refueling probe also allows Rafales to refuel from any tanker equipped with a NATO standard drogue. Here Rafales take on fuel from a French Air Force Boeing C-135. Throughout the mission, the entire package is networked using the MIDS LVT data link system. Each Rafale is connected electronically to other aircraft in the package, including the Hawkeye AEW platform. The formation is also linked to the Senate 8 combat information system aboard the carrier. For the attack, Scalp missiles are launched from ranges up to 600 kilometers from the target. They're fully autonomous, so once they're launched, the Rafales can return to the carrier. The AASM and laser bombers need to get closer to the target and may have to fight through defenses to get near enough to drop their weapons. The Spectra suite is used to automatically jam threats as they appear, or dispense chaff and flares. Attacking from high altitude and at high speed, the bombers can achieve a significant standoff ability, even with AASMs and LGBs. The latter thanks to the excellent capabilities of the Damocles pod. As the dust settles from such a large-scale attack, another Rafale makes a reconnaissance run to provide a rapid assessment of the raid's effects. On returning to the carrier, the Rafales use an advanced microwave landing system to bring them back safely aboard. The system uses optical and laser tracking and interfaces with the aircraft's auto-throttle and autopilot to bring the aircraft's hook down into contact with the second of 3 arrestor wires that stretch across the deck. At maximum rate, the system can recover an aircraft every 30 seconds. But the Aero Naval typically employs 1-minute separation between aircraft. In the late 1970s, the air forces in Western Europe found themselves facing the impending threat of a new generation of Soviet fighters, exemplified by the MiG-29. Dassault Brigade was among the companies that were studying new fighter types, and by the early 1980s was working on a program called Avion de Combat Expérimental, or ACX. While the ACX design was evolving, the French government was in discussions with other European nations, notably West Germany and the United Kingdom, to possibly pool their efforts into one program. While the dialogue continued, France announced the go-ahead for an ACX technology demonstrator in 1983. ACX was to be a multi-role fighter, similar in size to Dassault's previous fighter product, the Mirage 2000. It was to be capable of firing up to 6 air-to-air missiles in quick succession, or carrying a heavy air-to-ground load. Excellent maneuverability and a thrust-to-weight ratio of greater than 1 were required, as was short takeoff and landing capability. It also had to be rapidly maintained and serviced between missions. France, at least, also required its aircraft to be carrier-capable. In April 1985, the ACX was named the Rafale, or Squall. Shortly after, with European discussions dead, the other nations elected to continue with their own program, which eventually emerged as the Eurofighter. This left France to continue on its own with the Rafale. Going it alone increased the technological risk factor and the amount of investment required, but at the same time, it also removed any political stumbling blocks that would inevitably arise when partners strove to protect their national interests. All the while high-level talks were going on, Dassault Breguet's experimental workshop at Saint-Cloud near Paris was working on the ACX demonstrator. Christened Rafale A, it was unveiled in December 1985. Having been trucked to the Flight Test Center at Istres, Rafale A took to the skies on the 4th of July 1986 with Guy Miteau Maurouard at the controls. During its first flight, the aircraft achieved Mach 1.3 and 36,000 feet and was maneuvered to 5G. Rafale A was certainly a thing of beauty, maintaining Dassault's tradition of producing fine-looking fighters. More importantly, in its close-coupled canard delta layout, it demonstrated state-of-the-art aerodynamics. As the intended Snecma M88 engine could not be ready in time, so Rafale A initially flew with 2 General Electric F404s imported from the US. Initial flight trials were aimed at expanding the envelope. In January 1987, the Rafale A achieved Mach 2, well above the specified speed requirement, and a vindication of the type's V-shaped forward fuselage design. As development gathered pace, it was obvious that the first service application of Rafale would be to replace the French Navy's elderly Crusader carrier-borne fighters. In April 1987, Rafale A began flying carrier approach trials. Although unable to land on the carrier, the aircraft flew numerous approaches to within a few feet of the deck to verify the type's handling around the carrier. In July 1989, the Rafale A went back to the workshop for a refit, emerging for a first flight on the 27th of February 1990 with an M88 engine installed in place of the Port F404. With this engine, the aircraft demonstrated the ability to supercruise at Mach 1.4. On its 865th and last flight, the aircraft led a formation comprising the entire fleet of 5 Rafale prototypes, 4 more representative prototypes having flown in the meantime. The 4 prototype aircraft that followed Rafale A were slightly smaller and were much closer to the intended production configuration. The batch covered the 3 main production versions: the Rafale C single-seater for the French Air Force, Rafale B two-seater, and the Rafale M single-seater for the Navy. As the Navy requirement was more urgent, 2 Rafale M prototypes were built. Rafale C-01 was the first to be completed. revealed at Saint-Cloud on the 29th of October 1990. After completion, it was disassembled and trucked to Istra. It was reassembled and tested thoroughly before it made its first flight on the 19th of May 1991. It was the first Rafale to fly with two M88 engines installed. For a while, it was advertised as the Rafale D for discreet. This alluded to the considerably reduced radar cross-section of the production Rafale design. The first marinized Rafale MO1 flew on the 12th of December 1991. Like the C prototype, MO1 lacked most of the intended operational equipment, but was heavily instrumented for a variety of tests. In June 1992, it was shipped to Lakehurst in New Jersey to begin trials with a dummy carrier deck. To cater for operations from a short deck, the Rafale M employed an unusual jump strut, in which the nosewheel shock absorber was compressed during the launch run until the end of the deck was reached. Then the tension was released, thrusting the nose of the aircraft upwards by a few degrees. A modest ski ramp was also employed on the carrier for imparting extra lift during launch. Following extensive tests on the dummy deck, Rafale MO1 was ready to go to sea, making its first carrier landing on the 19th of April 1993, while the carrier Fock sailed in the Mediterranean. It launched for the first time the next day. The next prototype to fly was BO1, the first two-seater. This first flew on the 30th of April 1993 and was soon fitted with a development RBE2 radar. A second naval prototype, MO2, followed it on the 8th of November 1993, joining MO1 on the carrier trials campaign. Although a second C prototype was planned, this was cancelled, leaving the overall number at 4. Rafale was created using a revolutionary computer-aided design program developed by Dassault known as CATIA. This allowed every part of the aircraft to be modelled in 3D. The basic Rafale design consists of a central fuselage body housing the cockpit, intake trunks, and engines. The pilot sits high up behind the steeply raked nose, giving an excellent view all round. The view forward is especially good to aid carrier landings. The Rafale B has a raised and extended canopy to house the twan-seat cockpit, but is otherwise similar to the single-seater. The forward fuselage is roughly triangular in section, the lower sides forming a curved V shape that aids air entry into the intakes at high angles of attack. The wings are a simple, cropped delta shape, with canards mounted on the upper forward fuselage in a close-coupled configuration. That means there is a very short distance between wings and canards, with extensive aerodynamic interaction between the two. The whole front end of the Rafale is carefully blended, curved and chined to reduce radar cross-section in the frontal aspect. While it isn't a true stealth aircraft, Rafale C has a much lower RCS than the Rafale A, thanks primarily to detailed shaping. Rafale components are constructed at a number of plants around France. Completed sub-assemblies are then shipped to Mérignac near Bordeaux for final assembly. The first production aircraft, a two-seater, first flew on the 24th of November 1998. Production initially covered 13 standard F-1 aircraft with an austere air-to-air capability. As well as providing 3 aircraft for testing, comprising 2 Bs and a C, there were 10 Rafale Ms that were used to form the first operational squadron for the Navy. The next 48 aircraft are built to standard F-2, which adds a wide range of air-to-ground capability. The bulk of the aircraft will be to standard F-3, with the full complement of capabilities, including nuclear strike and reconnaissance. Earlier aircraft will be progressively upgraded to standard F-3. A notional standard F-4 is under evaluation and will probably include several items currently under evaluation or development, such as conformal fuel tanks, active array radar, uprated engines, and new weapons.
ステルス戦闘機 F117 ナイトホーク。レーダーでの捕捉を困難にするステルス技術を積極的に取り入れた F117 は湾岸戦争で世界中に名を広めました。今やステルスは戦闘機の必須の技術です。長年秘密のベールに包まれてきた F117 の全貌を解き明かします。次号もぜひお買い求めください。